It's -10. This is day 1 of filming in Canada, and it's my first scene, so I'm a little nervous. Except I'm not in Canada, and I'm not a real actress. I'm AI.
Welcome to my domain. I am going to show you how the magic happens. Here is your tour guide, and what your exclusive access will allow you to see.
It isn't as simple as typing a knight fights epic battle. I'll show you how it can take hours to write the perfect scene. Then you get the perfect voice acting, perfect kill shot, and then the AI mistakes the peasant in the background for the main character, and suddenly they are leading your army. Or worse, they just won't stop singing every time you give them a line. Here we are at the research room, where real physics meet fantasy. We look into everything from the best weapons suited for a woman to how living for 1,000 years affects vampire psychology.
600 years has driven you insane!
Dozens of hours of research went into making these movies. You may be wondering why this is relevant. We wanted to make the experience as authentic as possible, despite the fantasy elements. I'll let the director take it from here. He'll give you a quick look at how real-world history and weapon physics give our universe its gritty realism.
So let's take Red, for example. She's 35 years old, heavily scarred, and a veteran of brutal, unforgiving training. She doesn't fight like a cinematic superhero, she fights like a survivor. So to survive, she has to navigate a harsh, uncompromising, biological reality. In a direct, muscle-for-muscle matchup, she cannot beat a trained man strength for strength, period. So she doesn't even try to. So to ground this story in reality, she works as a laborer in a mine, which gave her exceptional upper body strength, and years of long-distance running built a legendary cardiovascular engine. But none of this was a genetic miracle. It was the grueling result of 15 years of vigorous, brutal, and unforgiving physical training. She's remarkably quick, and more importantly, she will outlast you. And now we look. Her 6-foot ash spear and centigrip shield gives her the perfect combination and realistically for any woman fighter in this setting, while the spirit allows her to dominate spatial distance using leverage and speed instead of brute force. Red shifted the battlefield from her arms to her mind. She developed a devastatingly sharp, tactical intellect. We see this play out clearly in her movie, where she refuses to give the enemy a clean fight. Instead, she orchestrates the environment, laying lethal traps to control the crowd, isolating groups of bandits and pick them off one by one. The moment an opponent underestimates her because of her stature or her exhaustion, the match is already over. By the time you realize she isn't playing by your rules, the trap is sprung, and you're already dead.
Thousands of reference images are generated per movie. We will now show you how this works.
The biggest myth about AI filmmaking is that you can just type a sentence into a box and magically get a masterpiece. That's not directing. That is gambling. Of course, sometimes you're lucky and you get a decent image straight away, but then you have to think about character consistency, because how is this going to affect your other scenes? To achieve true narrative consistency across hundreds of scenes, you cannot leave anything to chance. You have to build reference images by hand, spending hours manually editing and painting details into the images. My pipeline is strict, and it always starts with the foundation, the background. I lock in the geometry or the architecture or the landscape first. Once the environment is stable, I layer in the weather, painting in fog, rain, ash, to force the engine to understand the atmosphere and the lighting before any characters are even present in the scene. Only then do I bring in the characters, usually manually cutting them out of the other reference images and forcing them into the exact poses required for the upcoming scene. Mapping the frame asset by asset, adding characters one by one. Because if you add all of your characters at once to an image, sometimes it just becomes a blurred mess and they look nothing like those that you created. But the AI machine is chaotic. If you give it an image, sometimes it gets confused and blends textures together. To fight this, I use a color coding system. I use brutal, high-contrast colors for my main characters. For example, Knight in green armor, or Vampire in red. This harsh color coding serves as a visual guide helping the AI differentiate boundaries. So if I want my red-haired warrior against a knight, I can add in a 360-degree orbiting shot. Because otherwise if I say, warrior on the left stabs the warrior on the right, when the camera turns around, suddenly your hero gets impaled and killed. Even with this control, it's a constant tug of war. The AI loves to change things you absolutely want to keep. You paint the perfect sword, and it decides to turn it into a giant golden axe. You fix a character's expression, and the engine suddenly decides the background is now an entirely different continent. You're constantly fighting the model to preserve your creative intent. But if you think that's the hard part, fighting the engine's creative choices is nothing compared to fighting its safety filters. The guardrails built into these models are incredibly rigid, often interpreting entirely mundane, innocent visual elements as highly explicit, violent, or breaking policy. If you want a pristine example of this madness, I'm not going to tell you the exact AI that I used, but I recently spent an hour trying to generate a simple, dramatic close-up of a character wearing a red, hooded cloak. No weapons, no violence, just a red hood. As you can see, the machine instantly slapped me with a hard safety block, refusing to generate. When I pushed for the reason, the text response essentially told me it couldn't specify why, but implied the image was being flagged as explicitly sexual. And to this day, I am still trying to figure out what kind of twisted, medieval fabric fetishes the developers programmed into that algorithm, because to a normal human being, a red hood means Little Red Riding Hood or a monk. But to this AI, it's an unrated adult film. You really can't make this up. And it gets worse. It almost never tells you the exact reason why it refused to generate. The reason for this is so that people can't learn ways to bypass the safety filters. You're left entirely in the dark, playing a guessing game against a hypersensitive algorithm. And because of this, I once spent 2 entire days trying to edit a single pivotal image of a couple ready for their kissing scene. Every single iteration, every minor modification I requested was instantly hit of a hard safety block. But you know what the real reason was? Because in the far background, completely out of focus and barely even visible in the shadows of the room, sat a wooden bed frame. The automated safety filter saw a couple close together and a bed in the same zip code, panicked and assumed I was trying to render an explicit sex scene. Directing state-of-the-art artificial intelligence isn't like collaborating with digital superintelligence. It's like trying to manage a hyperactive toddler who has a genius-level IQ but absolutely zero common sense. You have to guide it by the hand through every single millimeter of the canvas, because the moment you look away, it does something entirely unhinged. And once you finally conquer the static image, you hit the most dangerous button in AI filmmaking. Pressing play, image to video generation is a completely different beast. Editing a still image is like arguing with a toddler. Turning it into a video is like letting that toddler drive a sports car. The absolute biggest rookie mistake you can make at this stage is typing something lazy, like epic battle or knight's fight. If you do that, the engine will hand you absolute garbage. If you do this, you'll get 2 heavily armed men either aggressively hugging or slapping each other, which is exactly what happened in one of my vampire scenes when I tried to generate them having a hand-to-hand combat fight Instead of punches, it mistook the hits as an aggressive slapping match. The best way to generate these clips is to start the beginning with not generating a 15-second or 20-second clip. As the AI progresses, it gets worse and worse during the generation. To get premium motion, cutting out the bad parts is the only way to survive. You generate 4 seconds, 5 seconds, maybe 10 if you want to get a good one-shot scene. But ultimately, you have to cut out the bad parts and move on to a new clip, merge them together, and create your scene that way from different angles of the fight. However, there is one technique you can use if you really want to get that cinematic one-shot fight, or you want your scene to look like it has been made as a one-shot. To do this, you generate your starting image, let the scene play out, and if it's perfect, then you take a screenshot or image of the final frame, use that as another starting image, and then when you're now at your next video, your starting image for that video will match the end frame of the last video. You could then do micro editing right down to the millisecond, and it appears as though the scene is one long scene. However, this also faces the problems of trying to get a perfect scene so that you can get that final frame and it merges together as one. I've done this in a few of my clips, but still the best way I found is to cut to a new angle to make the scene look authentic. This workflow is a total financial roller coaster. Some days you have a golden run where the algorithm behaves and you get 8 out of 10 usable scenes. Other days I will literally spend $40 on 10 consecutive takes just trying to get a character to perform a basic physical action, like a clean shield block the AI can simply not wrap its digital brain around. And at this point you're wondering, why don't I just go with the first 1 or 2 generations I get that look like they could be okay? Well, that's what a lot of people do. They generate one scene, call it a day, and just post it, and it doesn't always look good. But since I've already suffered for the financial wreckage of learning this machine, let me save you your wallet. And my advice is to first start off with 5-second clips. The AI is usually better with these because it can't lose track of what it's doing, and you can learn from these on how to create longer clips. I wouldn't recommend going longer than 10 seconds and only use those if you really think you know what you're doing. If you jump straight to the longer, expensive scenes, you're probably going to realize quite quickly that you're wasting a lot of money on those scenes. Once you have wrestled the AI into giving you the war footage, the battle happens on the editing timeline. I won't bore you with the tedious step-by-step hours of tutorials here. Editing is pretty self-explanatory. You cut the scenes, you trim the fat, and you throw away the junk. But in AI filmmaking, the timeline is where the illusion is actually stitched together. Because AI-generated video and audio don't naturally talk to each other, everything comes into CapCut completely separated. My main job here is surgical. I have to zoom all the way into the audio tracks to manually slice out which digital artifacts, clicks, and background static the voice engines accidentally leave behind. Then comes the real alignment. I look at waveforms, manually syncing the exact frame. A sword impacts the shield with a heavy metal sound effect. I split the audio, adjust levels so the dialogue isn't drowned out, and precisely time the shifts in music to match the emotional beats of the scene. Some of the things I have to do, overlapping sounds, isolating voices, etc. But that is nothing compared to the total narrative collapse that is my cutting room floor.
And now we go into the depths of the studio. To the morgue, my favorite place.
Here we look at the monstrosities kept hidden, mistakes and horrors of the dark. We won't show you every blooper we encountered, just a little taste of the insanity.
And then there's the pure bloopers, the clips that are genuinely belonging in a digital psychological horror movie. I'm not even going to talk through this next section. I quite literally do not have the emotional strength or the budget to relive it. I'm just going to step back, get out of the way, and let you witness some of the absolute horrors I've had to endure during production.
Oh, God! Oh. Cough! Cough!
When you run out of arrows, you run. No toothpick this time, okay?
Yeah.
Ambient sounds of wind whistling across a
Don't underestimate me!
If you don't,
We're standing like Tinderlei. She will kill us both. If you
don't.
Okay, I guess no. She will kill us both.
If you don't.
Someday you find that angered. She will kill us both.
I'm a shield maiden.
Just treat her good and hold her while you can.
I saw him over by Darrow. I saw his presence. I saw him over by Darrow. I saw him over by Darrow.
I had to smile. Do you know how much it hurts to nod and pretend I care? You're so strong, so beautiful.
For Valhalla!
For honor! Not today!
And that, my friends, is the digital morgue. A tragic graveyard filled with dead film, unhinged code, and every single mistake the director tried to bury to pretend he knows what he's doing. Unfortunately, darling, the director just ran out of monthly credits to generate your exit animation.
Oh, before we finish, I promised you future spoilers. Well, 2 were hidden in this video. Did you miss them?